Hi there, welcome to this vodcast on how to answer question 1d for the Russia paper for GCSE Modern World History by Edexcel. The files for this presentation can be found at relentlesshistory.wordpress.com or twitter.com/BritainHistory. Well, let's get started, shall we? So, the first thing to begin with is to understand 1d is a causation question. We can understand that because it says explain why the Tsar was unpopular. So where we see the idea of being explaining, we should really be aiming at making sure our sentence starts to promote that skill. Don't say we're going to be describing or identifying facts, we're going to be explaining why these things were important in answering the question. Be aware of the dates. Here we see February 1917 being established, so we can't go after that time period. We need to understand we're talking about the February Revolution of 1917. And understanding why the Tsar was unpopular before then. You've got 8 marks available for this question. Well, with the time, that means you've got 12 minutes to complete it, which means you're allowed 2 substantial paragraphs or 3 short paragraphs. If we have a look at the mark scheme, we can go into a bit more detail. So, if we have a look at the target, it identifies causation as our key skill. 1d will typically be a causation question. Making simple points will get you 1 to 2 marks. Applying narrative to that will get you 3 to 5 marks, and you can see 3 to 4 for 1 developed cause and 4 to 5 for 2 or more. So writing down what you know about that topic can get you up to 5 marks. However, all it takes is 1 more sentence per point to get really good marks. I've highlighted here a model answer in the mark scheme. What we see is the signpost, the point, the evidence, an explanation and development, or a speed paragraph. So one of the reasons, signposts. The war was going badly is the point. In the blue we see the evidence being applied, and underlined we see development of that evidence. The final section is the explanation. Now this on its own would score 6 to 7 marks. Let's have a look at an example answer. We see a simple introduction being applied, but then oddly, the person writing this starts off with a point. It says the decision to stay in the war, the point, was a key reason, and therefore signposting. We see in blue a narrative. Throughout this point in time of war, Russians were struggling on supplies, soldiers and peasants' lives. From staying in the war would increase death rate and waste supplies. Now the narrative isn't exactly brilliantly constructed, however the explanation is well done. Therefore this very much annoyed the people and allowed them to dislike the Tsar. So they've referred it back to the question. It's not a strong argument, but it would get a level 3. We then see a signpost again. Another reason for the Tsar being unpopular was due to the peasants' lives and living conditions. So again, I've highlighted in green where the point is being applied. We now see a better constructed narrative. 85% of peasants were unhealthy. Supplies were very low and living conditions were extremely poor. That on its own would be a level 2. But we see a good connective being used. Therefore, due to this, many illnesses occurred and deaths were taking place. This put the Tsar in a position where he was wanted and needed for help. However, nothing was done. The Tsar was very unpopular, and then, from showing no care for the peasants, the decision to stay in the war decreased his popularity. So again, they've referred back to the question. In the third paragraph, we see the same signpost being applied. A better example would have been to say a final reason, rather than another, after having repeated it. Here they identify his wife as the issue, and again apply a narrative, and then an explanation. Now looking at the mark scheme, if they'd have stopped there, we'd be talking about 7 marks out of 8. However, this candidate scores 8 out of 8. For the simple fact they add an overall conclusion. Overall, I believe the poor life of the peasants was the biggest problem for the Tsar. So they've identified which reason of those three they think was the most important, and they've suggested why. And if we look back at our mark scheme, we can see award 8 marks for any answer which prioritises the causes and demonstrates how they combined to create the outcome. Well, this person has identified the issues with the war, the poor working conditions, and the role of the Tsar's wife. They've identified the problems of the working conditions and living conditions of the peasants as the main one, and they've suggested why. So this would have to get 8 out of 8. Remember, sticking one extra paragraph, a short sentence or two, as a conclusion will get you full marks if you've looked at least 2 good reasons why whatever factor you're looking at answers the question. Okay, I hope this has been useful. Remember, there are other videos available to have a look at. Thank you for watching, and good luck with your exams.